everybody. It is Fab Friday here. It's Friday, August 6th. It's so great to see you. I've got my personal fan working with me today. The weather here in Palm Desert has been crazy. It's so humid, which makes it terribly uncomfortable. But guess what today is? Today is... Yay! So hello to everybody checking in. Of course, it's Friday, August 6th. It's another episode of Fabulous Fab Friday. It's episode number 42, where we're going to talk about our square ruler and just some tips and tricks that I want to share with you about square rulers. And we're going to talk about a little bit of news about the quilts that are sitting behind me here, but I want to say hello to everybody first. It's been a long time since we've been on the air. It seems like eons, years. It's only been about 4 weeks. We're doing this once a month now. The next time we'll be on will be actually in 3 weeks, which will be Friday, August 27th, because we don't want to be on the weekend of Labor Day because I don't think we're going to be here, actually. So we're going to be on vacation, I think. So I'm Linda, and that is who over there? Carl, and we're Colourwerx Designs. We're coming to you from beautiful but crazy hot and humid Palm Desert, California. Yesterday, our top temperature was the day before yesterday was 122. Yesterday was 118, but that's not really so horrible because normally it's dry heat. But what's happened is we're having very monsoon, very humid weather. We could not, I mean, I hate to say this, we could not get dry a couple days ago. It was horrible. I don't know how many showers we took during the day and dips into the pool and things like that. So I want to wish everybody a happy Friday. I see everybody checking in. Let's see who's checking in from where. Trudy, good morning, you guys. Hello. And Lena's checking in. And Mary, and Kay from Palm Desert. So Kay knows what we're talking about here with the humidity. It is hot. It's finally drying out, I think. Good morning, Nedra. Hello, how are you?
She's in Washington today.
You're in Washington. Wow, you're still traveling. And Nancy's checking in. You guys have been great. And Sandra, and Teddy, and Carl's just like zooming through all your comments. Julie and Sandra, hello to everybody and anybody who didn't comment. Now make sure that you like and share this video with all your quilty friends and your pets and anybody else you want to. Make sure that you actually subscribe if you haven't already to our Colourwerx YouTube channel as we're trying to grow our Colourwerx family. I see Suzanne just checked in as well. Hello from Vista, California.
She's cool.
She's overcast. Well, I wish we were overcast or cool. We didn't even get any rain.
Well, let's check on the Cactus Cam.
So let's check the Cactus Cam and see what's going on. It's a beautiful...
Oh, there's a golfer. He's pushing.
Oh, look, there's a golfer out there. Shh, shh. It's a golfer. It's a beautiful day here in Palm Desert. But that's the humidity, yes. Way back there. You can see it way back there.
Is he going to get to the hole?
But it is a beautiful day.
Is he going to get there?
But these golfers are crazy. You know, even when we had the 122-degree weather a couple days ago, and it was so humid, there were golfers out there at like 10 in the morning, and it was like 112 degrees on the golf course. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Crazy.
Anyway, let's see what...
So good morning. Okay, who else? Who's that? Amjo. Hello from Yucaipa. And Julie, our good friend from Oceanside. And Petra, good morning, everybody. Okay, so let's talk. Let's talk for a minute. If I've gone through all the things I'm supposed to go through here, I have to check in and see where I'm where. Let's first give away our $10 Colourwerx gift card before we get going on all the news and the tutorial. So you know every episode of Fab Friday, we give away a Colourwerx gift card for everybody who's commented from the last time we were on the air. So the question on our last episode, which was episode 41, which we did a fun tutorial on how to sew freeform liberated curves, was what will you make out of your curved quilting? And the winner from all your comments going into the random thingamajizer is Leslie Bussing, congratulations. You are this week's $10 Colourwerx gift card winner. We will get you that gift card right in the email as soon as the program ends today. So make sure you guys comment. Everybody goes in, whether you're saying hello or commenting about whatever the question is. We put everybody's names in the random thingamajizer at the end of the show or before the next show and select or randomly select a winner. So that is this week's winner. So let's talk. I'm just like getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about these quilts. So I've been working on these quilts. So if you've been with us on our Instagram and our social media Facebook pages, you've seen some of these pictures. And I've been making the same quilt pattern, but 2 versions of that quilt pattern. And so this is a new quilt pattern called Labyrinth, which is coming out in September. It was slightly delayed. It was supposed to be out, I believe, in July, but because our fabric was a little bit delayed, we decided to delay the pattern. So apologies there, but it is coming out. It's one of these quilts designed by Carl, so it's in the looks complicated, but it's not category.
That's right.
It's super easy to piece. We'll talk more about this later in a couple weeks when we're back on the air. I'll go more into detail on this quilt. But just to give you a hint on it, so it's basically 12 half yards of fabric plus a background fabric and some border fabrics. And each block is made exactly the same. But what makes it look crazy is that you are combining you're cutting each fabric in exactly the same way with exactly the same units, and then you do combinations of different fabrics for each block, which makes it look like it's intertwining across the blocks, if I can say that. And we'll show you a full color picture in just a minute. But this one right here is our beautiful Colourwerx line that just came out from Island Boutiques and Sweet Bee Fabrics. And the one right behind me, if I move over to this side, is Phosphor. And this is Lib Elliott's new basic line. It's the new colors in her Phosphor line, which is a beautiful basic. It looks iridescent, it looks sparkly, but there's no sparkle in the fabric. There's no sparkles, meaning actually woven into the fabric. But it has a beautiful iridescent quality about it. So I had to make 2 versions. I had to make one out of Colourwerx and one out of Phosphor, which is Lib Elliott's line from Andover Fabrics, which is in shops now. So if you like the way this looks with the solids and you want to kind of pump up your solid game a little bit without just buying more solids, check out Phosphor by Lib Elliott because it's a beautiful line. And no affiliation, just I love her fabric. So there you go. So we'll show you that, but we did want to talk about our Colourwerx fabrics. So this is, I'm showing the card because this is all really we have left. And we want to thank you guys so much for being such great guys, great customers, such enthusiasm. We were completely overwhelmed, completely humbled by your enthusiasm, by your support. We completely sold out of all of our Colourwerx fabric bundles, half yards, fabrics within 1 week. And we are happy to say that Island Boutiques is printing more, so more is due in October. We think it might be a little sooner, but right now they're saying October. So, but if you subscribe to our newsletter, you'll be the first to know that it's coming back into the Colourwerx shop. There is the line, so in case you missed out, it's 12 SKUs in all. It goes in color wheel order. They are super fun, happy, whimsical little prints, tone on tones, and kind of mid-mod flares in each fabric. There's 12 SKUs in all. We did fat quarter bundles and half yard bundles. And again, we'll have more in our Colourwerx shop in October at the very latest, I believe. If you are looking for yardage, there are quilt shops that have this. And also I hear fabric.com actually is carrying the Colourwerx line as well. So if you're looking for yards and yards of a singular print, that would be the place to go. So we did want to thank you guys so much for your enthusiasm, for your support. We were just completely overwhelmed and humbled. So thank you, you guys, very much. And we're going to show you also, what are we showing now? Labyrinth, I think.
Back to Labyrinth.
Where's that card?
Right there.
There. So that is the Labyrinth quilts that you're seeing right behind me on the design wall. These are going to be headed up to our quilter Teresa Silva, whose quilting is my bliss, and she's going to be doing some beautiful free motion quilting magic on these quilts as soon as I get the borders on. But on the left-hand side, you can see the Phosphor 21 by Libs Elliott through Andover Fabrics version. And on the right-hand side, you can see our Colourwerx version. And so again, this is falls into the category of Carl's looks complicated, but it's not. And it's a really, really fun quilt to make. I really enjoyed the last couple weeks of quilting these and putting these two versions together. It's just easy piecing once you get those combinations together. And of course, you know, you can bag them up or you put them in file folders when you put all the different units.
The combinations.
Yeah, and we give you the combinations, of course, in the pattern, because that would be really stupid if we didn't, right, Carl? Because we would have to give you the combinations. I mean, you know.
It looks difficult, but it's easy.
It's easy. But let's look at some other Colourwerx quilts in action. When we're next on the air, August 27th, we're going to talk about the Colourwerx fabrics more in detail, the inspiration behind the Colourwerx fabric line, show you some other things we've done with the Colourwerx fabric line, but I just wanted to give you kind of a little sneak peek and taste of what Colourwerx fabrics look like when you put them in quilts. So you can see we've got a Dresden flower up there. That's just that's our sunny kind of pattern where we did the center sun portion of that pattern in the Colourwerx line, and it's just a huge 36-inch Dresden flower, basically. And then below that is our waterfall pattern, which always looks great in almost any fabric you put it in. Again, these all use 12 fabrics. And then in the middle version, you see that little one that looks kind of like a EKG symbol or something, a heartbeat, or it's the middle one. That one we call Pump It Up. And it's like a sound bar. Yes, that's a better way of putting it. Not an EKG symbol. No, it's like a sound bar. But we call that version called Pump It Up, and that's going to be a new pattern coming out soon. On the top of that is our mini spiky pattern, which is a table runner using Colourwerx. And then, of course, to the right, you guys have seen sneak peeks of all of these. Mod Squad is coming out. So anybody who loves the 60s and 70s, that quilt may appeal to you. And you're going to start seeing me build that quilt next week on our Instagram and Facebook posts. So if you are subscribing to our Instagram or Facebook, Colourwerx Facebook pages, you're going to start seeing sneak peeks of the Mod Squad faces being built, as well as I'm going to do another version in a new Allison Glass line as well. So I always like to do two versions of our patterns at the same time. It's kind of easier to build two versions at the same time versus one and then one, if that makes sense. So anyway, those are some sneak peeks of our Colourwerx fabrics in action. Again, we thank you guys so much for your support on that line. And please tell your friends, anybody who missed out, it's all coming back, loads and loads of it in October to our Colourwerx shop. So before I move on to the tutorial, are there any questions, burning questions, or comments that we need to take? What's going on there? Mary says, that's great. Did we get Mary's comment?
Yes, you did.
Oh, I didn't see it. That's great. I hesitated, and then the fabric was all gone. But it's coming back, Mary. Yes. Okay.
Kathy checking in from New York
Hey,
City.
Kathy. Hello from New York City. All right. So are we ready to talk about square rulers? Shall we move on to this tutorial? I want to let you know that before I move over to the overhead, the reason I wanted to talk about square rulers today is because, you know, as you know, with the pandemic and things like that, we've been teaching a lot of workshops via Zoom. And I realized as I was teaching via Zoom, because I only can see what into everybody's room via whatever their camera is set up, that some ladies were struggling using their square ruler. When I would say, okay, let's take this block and square it down, I realized, well, some guys, yeah, were struggling with their square ruler. So I wanted to kind of go through today the basics of the square ruler, how to use it, and just give you some tips and tricks on it. And a lot of this is going to seem kind of elementary, but I think it's good. So let's move over to the overhead. And there is the square ruler. Okay. Now, I'm taking a sip of water. Now, I'm a firm believer that for your quilting needs, you know, there are oodles and oodles and oodles of rulers out there. So you can buy a square ruler in almost any size you want, all the way from 1.5 inch or 2.5 inch, all the way up to a big daddy 21.5 or 24.5 inch. But I am a firm believer, and when I used to teach beginning quilting, that what you really need in your quilting arsenal are two rulers to get you through almost anything. You need your 6 by 24, or you can do an 8.5 by 24, whatever your preference is, but you need a a rectangular ruler such as this, and you need a 12.5-inch square ruler. So these two rulers will pretty much get you through almost any quilting project. Now, if you prefer to have smaller square rulers, like a 9.5-inch, like this one, or a 6.5-inch, that's your preference. I have several square rulers in all different sizes, and it just depends on what feels comfortable in your hand and what size you're squaring down to. But a 12.5-inch square ruler will get you through everything up to 12.5 inches, which is most blocks when you're quilting. So here's what we're going to talk about first with the square ruler. This is the Creative Grids square ruler. And I'm not an influencer of Creative Grids. I just happen to like their rulers. And let me just turn that around so you can see the name. Creative Grids square ruler right there. Most quilt shops sell these. One of the reasons that I really like this square ruler versus Olfa or OmniGrid or some of the other square rulers out there is, one, it's white, which is what I like. The lines are black and white on it, which is nice. It also has lots of increments. So one of the things that I'm going to tell you, the biggest tip to using your square ruler correctly is getting to know your square ruler. And I know that sounds really crazy, but this is what I used to tell beginning quilting students. Take your square ruler and start to study it. Don't cut anything with it. Just look at it for a minute and start to study where things are on your square ruler. For instance, this one from Creative Grids has lines every single 1/4 inch. But if I look more closely at it, I can also look at lines that are an 1/8 inch on it. It's got increments almost every single measurement that I need. It also goes in whole numbers. So these numbers that are in white circles here are whole numbers. But if I'm squaring down to, let's say, 10.5 or half numbers, if I switch the ruler over to the other side, the numbers that are in the black circles are the 1/2 inch increments. So 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, on to 12.5. Okay? It's also got this really nifty QR code here. So every single Creative Grids ruler has that QR code, which is really nifty because if you take your iPhone or smartphone and go to the camera and hover over that little QR code that's right down there in the corner, it will open up in your iPhone or smartphone or iPad tutorials that go along with this ruler. So for instance, let's say you have, just going off subject here for a minute, let's say you have a triangle ruler in your arsenal of rulers from Creative Grids and you forgot how to use it. Or you forgot, well, what is the purpose of this triangle ruler? If you just scan that QR code right there, you'll be taken to their website and you'll see videos or blogs of how to use this particular ruler. So that's very handy with Creative Grids as well. But getting back to the square ruler. So you have to get to know your square ruler. Again, when I look at this square ruler, I can see my 1/4 inch increments clearly marked by those lines right there, the white lines in between the 1 and the 2. I can see my the 1/8 inch lines if I need to. I have this nice diagonal line, which most square rulers have a diagonal line that goes down there. And all of that helps you. What I also like about the Creative Grids square ruler is, can you see the shaded area right here on the edge? There's a shaded area. That is the 1/4 inch mark, which is important because a lot of times we're wanting to make sure that we don't cut away our 1/4 inch seam allowance when we're squaring things down. So let's talk right away, other than that, how to square something down. So here is a basic half square triangle I just made out of some Tula Pink fabric. And I want to square this half square triangle down to, let's say, 8.5. Okay? And this is where I realized when teaching Zoom that some people may not know how to use their square ruler properly. So if I'm going to square this particular block down to 8.5 by 8.5, I've got a diagonal line, first of all, that's going to help me make sure that I don't square or cut off these points off center axis. I want to keep these still in the corners here. So the first thing I'm going to do is drop my square ruler down, and I'm going to line up the diagonal line of the square ruler on the diagonal seam line of the half square triangle. So here's my diagonal line, seam line. I run my diagonal line of the square ruler across that diagonal line. Now notice I'm using my 12.5-inch square ruler, yet I'm going to square this down to 8.5 by 8.5. If I wanted to, I could actually, for some reason, if I needed to, put tape, and this is just painter's tape, right here at the 8.5-inch lines to help guide my eye to the correct increment. So if I was doing this over and over and over again, then my eye would not have to go find that mark on the ruler anymore. I would tape it for myself. And you know, the quilt shops also sell like colored neon tape as well. The important thing though, before you start whacking away at the edges here, is make sure that you've got the diagonal line of the square ruler over the diagonal line of your half square triangle. Now, you can see that I'm going to cut away quite a lot. That's because I just happen to make my half square triangles a little larger than they ever need to be so that I'm always able to trim them down. The first thing I'm going to do is actually, once I've lined up my ruler, I'm going to actually then cut away the right edge and the top edge. Now, if you were left-handed, you're going to be coming in from the opposite way, but you're going to go whoosh and whoosh. So now I've got clean edges on my right edge and whoops, my top edge right there. As soon as my rotary cutter works. There. Okay? This is a clean edge. It's been cut. The next thing I'm going to do is actually, I'm not going to move my ruler up to this area and cut against myself. I just want to rotate the block 180 degrees and put those clean, newly freshly cut edges to the left and bottom. Now I realign my ruler, again lining up the diagonal line on the diagonal line of these half square triangle, and I place the 8.5-inch line marked by my tape here on the clean, fresh cut edges that I just did. So can you see that right there? Now what's left on the right and top gets cut away. And this avoids you having to cut against yourself. You never want to cut towards yourself with the rotary cutter. So again, once I'm lined up and ready to go, I just whoosh and whoosh. Now the great thing about that trimming down is now I have a perfect 8.5-inch by 8.5-inch half square triangle. Those little dog ears are gone and I don't have to worry about those when I piece. So that's the basics of using your square ruler when you need to square something down like a half square triangle. Again, using the diagonal lines to help you. Let's go on to something like this. And this is going to be a little tiny. We're going to have to come in. This is a quarter square triangle. And I want to square it down to 3.5 by 3.5. I can't just smack my ruler down here and put the 3.5-inch lines right here, because all of a sudden that center point that's right there is going to be off center. It's not going to be in the center of the block when it gets squared down. I'm going to switch over to my 9.5-inch square ruler because it's got a mark on it. And what I did is I actually created a little center point for myself. Now, to keep in mind, when you have a block like this, which is a quarter square triangle, and it has a definitive center point on it, like that does, where everything kind of converges together, if you're going to square it down, let's say to 3.5 by 3.5, you have to do a little math. You have to say to yourself, well, what is half of 3.5? Well, half of 3.5 is 1 3/4. So you need to find that mark. This is going back to getting to know your square ruler. You need to find that mark on your square ruler. And sometimes I'll just put a piece of tape there, or for the camera today, I've created like a little circle cutout out of some painter's tape. That's the 1 3/4-inch mark of my square ruler. That's the first place I need to place my square ruler when I'm going to square down something like this quarter square triangle. I need to place the center point of what I'm going to square my quarter squares triangle down to in the center point of the block.
It's like a target.
It's like a target, yes, crosshairs. And I need to make sure, once I know that I'm at the center target there, 1 3/4 inches for this example, I also need to make sure that I actually have the diagonal line of the square ruler running down the diagonal line of my quarter square triangle. That's very important because it keeps the corners in the corner. When you square down, it keeps these corner parts in the corner perfectly, if that makes sense. So once I know that, and I've double checked everything, you see I'm not even worried about the fact that I have excess fabric. Here's my 3.5 inch line. I'm going to put that yellow ruler right there. And you can see I have excess fabric to either side of that. I'm just going to double check my measurements one more time. Again, I go whoosh up the right side, whoosh across the top. Now, all I need to do is move my ruler to the side, rotate this block 180 degrees so I'm not cutting against myself. So now my fresh edges are on the left and the bottom edges here. Again, I move my ruler back into place, line up that center target I created for myself right there in the center of my quarter square triangle, line up the diagonal line one more time to make sure I'm okay, and I then cut away the right and the left edges again. Let me just double check that. Whoosh. Whoops, just a slip. Whoosh. Now I have, I think I need a new blade. Yes, but now I have a perfectly squared quarter square triangle. And so if I showed you what it looked like before, that's what it looked like beforehand when I built it. And they always get wonky when you piece them together. But once I trim and square down, you can see that I've got a perfectly squared quarter square triangle to go into my block making or to my quilt. And again, I've gotten rid of all those dog ears that get, those nasty dog ears that get into the way. And more importantly, I don't have to be too perfect with my 1/4 inch piecing here. So when I'm being a little sloppy, going a little fast, the trimming up and using the square ruler helps me achieve what I need to without having to be too exact here. And so you can see that the center point of my quarter square triangle remains in the center of my square. And of course, my tips, where these fabrics converge at the ends here, are perfectly into the coming to the edge or coming to the center edge of each tip of that thing. So let me show you some other things too with your square ruler. So let's say you want to double check a block like this. This is a butterfly block. And I've been making a lot of these, hint, hint, for our labyrinth quilt that was on the back wall there that you saw of the main shot of this tutorial. So if I wanted to look at this and just check it for accuracy, these should finish out, and I know this only because the pattern tells me this, these should finish out to be 6.5 by 6.5 inches. So again, I can take my 12.5 inch square ruler. I don't need a 6.5 inch square ruler to look at this, but if I had one, I could use it if I wanted to. But I'm going to use the 12.5 inch square ruler. And I can see when I stick it down there on the block, it's a little hard on the green here, but again, I've lined up the diagonal line of the square ruler over the diagonal line of the block. And I can see I'm pretty accurate. I'm at 6.5 by 6.5. If I put that there for you guys so you can see. I'm at 6.5 by 6.5. If I felt like I needed to, I could take a little trim top and right and then rotate the block and trim it again. What I'm also looking at here is I want to see accuracy-wise my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, getting to know your square ruler. I can see that this particular strip is measuring 2 inches by 2 inches, and my seaming or my stitching is relatively straight. How do I know that? And that's important because when I put my square ruler over the block again and give it a cursory glance, I'm looking at this line right here, tracking up. And if I put this here, you might see it right here. The edge, it's the seam line of where the yellow strip connects to this side and the seam line of where the yellow strip connects to the left side. And if I look at that and measure or count 1/4 inch increments over, I can see that it measures perfectly top to bottom 2 inches wide. That's important because if I was going to trim this block for any reason, I would want to make sure that I've lined up the ruler straight and true to the seam lines of this block, because I don't want to just whack away. I want to keep this center strip running straight and true, as well as the diagonal line running straight and true to the diagonal line. And so I hope I'm not being confusing, but that helps me look at my, the square ruler helps me see that I've lined up everything accurately. And I know that my 1/4 inch piecing is pretty accurate because this is measuring 2 inches wide. So that's another way that your square ruler helps you. Let's take that to another level. if I was going to look at an all stacked up block, if you guys have ever made the all stacked up quilt, this is an all stacked up quadrant or 1/3 or block. And this should measure 8.5 by 8.5. These are made of 2.5-inch strips. So again, using a little math and deduction, this strip here in the center, once it's sewn in from either side, should actually measure 2 inches wide at any point here and here. This strip, because it's not been sewn in on the outer edges, should measure 2.25 inches wide. The entire block itself measures 8.5. So if I wanted to check the accuracy and maybe trim it down to size, I can put my square ruler on there. I would line up my 8.5-inch marks, which are right here, and I'm putting that there so you guys can see right away. 8.5, 8.5 down here. I can see I'm fairly accurate. If for some reason I didn't know if I was accurate or not and I wanted to actually look, I can look at what the width of my strip is under the square ruler. And again, if I felt the need to trim this block, I would want to make sure that this particular strip in the center, and I know this measurement from the pattern, would measure 2 inches wide at this point and 2 inches wide down here. And I can see that it does measure 2 inches wide and 2 inches wide, and I'm using these lines that are on the square ruler to make sure that I am running straight and true right over the seam lines before I trim anything away. So again, that's where the square ruler helps you.
And can I go back on that?
Yes.
You're also tracking the diagonal from the corner where the pieces are sewn. That is also
that this is running straight and true into the corner, because you don't want to trim it like that.
No.
And you don't want to trim anything so that your strip is skewing off to the edge. So these are some ways of getting to know your square ruler. Here's a last example. This is paint box. And so a lot of times this throws people for a doozy. This particular block is supposed to measure 9 inches by 9 inches when you put together the two sides. This gray triangular piece here, L shape, and these 4 stripped triangles here. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it actually comes out a little less. And sometimes you want to, square down just so everybody is uniform. So again, if I needed to do this, here's my center point. And the reason that's the center point is because this is that strong diagonal line that converges here and it runs perpendicular with this seam line here. So if I wanted to square this block down, let's say to 8 3/4, I would have to figure out what half of 8 3/4 is. So let's see, what is half of 8 3/4? I think it's 4 3/8. Is that right, Carl?
Yes.
4 3/8, which is just below. It's an 1/8 inch less than 4.5, right? So I've got my 9.5-inch square ruler here, just because it's got the tape mark on it. And again, I've put my little crosshair or circular center at the 4 3/8 inch line. Now, if I was going to square this down to 9, I would just put it on the 4.5 inch line. But again, you have to do a little math, a little deduction. You have to figure out what half of the whole number you're squaring down to. I stick my my square ruler on there. I need to first put the center mark in the center of the block. That's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is I put the diagonal line of the square ruler running on the diagonal line of the block itself. Now, if you didn't have any strong diagonal lines like this one to go with, you might just make sure that you've got your diagonal line running where you think it should be, but also use the other lines of the ruler to help you line up across any strips that you might have here. So this black L shape that's right here, I'm actually looking, as I put the center line here and I run the diagonal line here, I'm actually looking to make sure that also one of the lines of the ruler is running straight and true across the seam line, if you can see where my finger's going, of this L shape. I don't want to skew it like that. That would be odd. So once I've got those particular things set on my square ruler, I'm ready to start squaring down. And again, I'm going to make this 8.5 by 8.5. So you're going to see quite a lot coming off. or did I say 8 3/4 by 8 3/4? Sorry, 8 3/4 by 8 3/4. So I'm at the 4 3/8 mark, which is the center of 8 3/4. Again, I'm going to trim the right side first, trim across the top edge next. Now I have these nice clean edges here. And again, I'm going to rotate the block 180 degrees so I'm not cutting against myself. If you're left-handed, you would go the opposite way. I would put my square ruler back on. I line up again, go through exactly the same thing. I line up that center mark that I've marked for myself in the center of the block. I line up the diagonal line across the diagonal line of the ruler, and then I make sure that I'm on the 8 3/4 inch mark when before I cut anything across the right or top edge here. So I need to make sure that my clean edges are lined up on the second cut to what I'm actually going to trim my block down to. Once I've got all that going, I can trim the right side, trim across the top, and now I have a nice squared down block ready to be put into my paint box quilt. So those are just some basics of square ruler. Whichever one you have in your arsenal, just go ahead, grab your square ruler and study it and give it a look and give it a cursory look. And also if you do have your creative grids, then scan that QR code and that will take you to more tutorials to show you how to use your square ruler. And with that, that's tips and tricks on square ruler use. Let me know if you have any questions. I just thought it would be good to go through that today. And we're going to go back, I think, where are we going, Carl? Back to the Cactus Cam and see what's happening while I move across the room to see what everybody's talking about. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial.
There's people golfing still.
There's loads more you can do with your square ruler, but again, a lot of it is getting to know your square ruler. And so there's so many different square rulers out there, and each one has different markings on it. So it's good to like study it and figure out what it's doing. Does anybody have any questions, Carl? Let's see.
Yes, let's go back to Julie.
Oh my goodness. What? What does Julie say? I love that the no slide. Oh yes, the built into the rulers. Yeah, so Julie says, I love the no slide built into the rulers. That's right. Creative Grids has a rough part to the back side or the wrong side of the ruler. And so it doesn't slide across your fabric, which really, really helps. So that is another great benefit of the Creative Grid rulers as well. Anybody else? Very helpful tips on how to square the quarter square triangle. Yes. Yeah, you do have to make sure that you get that little scent of the what Carl calls the crosshairs or the bullseye, as I call it. And of course, the quilt shops have lots of little sticky dots and things like that that you can buy and purchase to put on your square rulers, and neon colored tape if you want to tape out. I just use painter's tape, but that's because we always have it around the house. Nedra says, such great tips, Linda. Thank you. Well, thank you, you guys. I didn't know, I just figured out it was hard, when I teach Zoom, I'm usually, when we do in-person workshops, it's so much easier. I can walk up to a student and say, oh, you just do this with your square ruler. And then, so that's where this came out of, is I just realized I can't be there in the same room. And it was really hard to kind of show people how to use their square ruler if they didn't know how to use it. So.
Teddy says,
oh.
Did you have a tip on cutting your second whoosh line? I have caught the corner of my ruler and chipped it. Also damaged my blade.
You mean the whoosh line across the top? Yeah. It's, you know what, that's just practice. And a lot of times you have to get I was trying not to do it for the camera. The only tip I have, Teddy, is a firm grip on the ruler. And you have to hold the rotary cutter almost at what I would say, not 9, it's a slight angle. It's not a 90 degree. It's not perpendicular to the cutting board and to the ruler. It's just slightly less than that. So you just, you glide on the top edge of the ruler, and you do have to get your head right over it. So
take your time.
And take your time, yeah.
Don't slash away.
I was trying to avoid getting my head in the camera. Now, the other tip I have on that too is if you feel a little unsure about cutting across the top, which some people do, you can always, and this goes for even squaring down things, you can always draw it in. And I tell this to students all the time. If you're not sure about what you're cutting with your square ruler, like when you're squaring down a block, and this is maybe the first time you've done the pattern, why not draw in the lines that you're supposed to be cutting before you cut with, like, let's say a Frixion pen. So instead of just cutting and then making a mistake and realizing, oops, draw it in with a Frixion or washable marker, like up the right side and across the top, and then flip the block and draw in those lines again, and then you're left with a big square drawn on your block. And then you can actually see, well, did I do it right? If I did cut on those lines, was that right? Was that correct? I do that all the time when I don't understand a pattern. I'll just draw it in first and go, oh, okay, I see what they're talking about, and then I move on. So,
Julie says, a good reminder to watch which edges you are using with or without
the half inch. That's right. Yes, especially on the creative grid. So a lot of the other rulers don't do whole and half numbers, and the creative grids is unique in that way, I believe, that they do whole and half depending on which way you're looking at the ruler. And if the numbers are right side up, like they are right now in the black, that's half inch, like 1.5, 2.5. And if they're up and the white numbers are right side up, then that's whole numbers.
Trudy loves her Creative Grids rulers.
Yay! I do too. I love Creative Grids. I think it's a spectacular company. And like I said, I really like the fact that they have those QR codes on them that you can go look at their tutorials. And they're updating those tutorials all the time. So I find them especially handy when I'm using a specialty ruler, let's say a triangle ruler, and I go back to it 2 years later and go, what in the world did I buy this ruler for? What is this ruler supposed to do? And then you just scan the QR code and you're immediately taken to their tutorial. So it's great.
That was Susan's question. She had no idea.
Yeah. It's spectacular. We're using QR codes. Have you noticed much more nowadays with COVID, and going out to restaurants and things like that? Has anybody noticed that you're scanning that little code to get your menu? We used to have one on the door of Lindarella's, a huge QR code that people could scan to go to the website of Lindarella's quilt shop. And a lot of people were like, what is that? Nobody used it. This was 10 years ago, and they had just started QR codes, and nobody used them. And so we finally took the decal off the store window. So
Nancy gets her steps in by going around the other side of the table to cut it.
Well, you can do that. You can walk around. Now, that's a great idea, Nancy. You could walk around and come the opposite direction if you wanted to. But I just, I have always done that with my square ruler and squaring down blocks. I've always cut up the right side across the top, move the ruler off to the side, rotate that block 180 degrees, and then come back and replace the ruler and go again right side top with the edges that haven't been cut. I don't know why. It's just you're never cutting against yourself except for coming across the top, which you have to do. Be very careful that your rotary cutter doesn't slip up and over that ruler, because that can be pretty dangerous too.
Amjad said she'd never really noticed there was two sizes.
Oh, that 1 inch and 1.5 inch? Yes, there is. So
check all your rulers.
That's why when I used to teach beginning quilting classes, we used to have 10 minutes of getting to know your square ruler or getting to know your ruler. Because I'm telling you, it really makes a difference if you actually take this thing and go look at it without cutting fabric, without doing anything. Just study the markings on it, and you'll discover all these wonderful markings that are on your square ruler that will help you line things up. And again, it's really important too when let's say you're trimming down 4 strips. Let's say you have a 4-strip piece or a 3-strip block, and you want to make sure that those strips are running straight and true, like up and down straight. That if you line up the lines of your ruler on those the seam lines, and then trim things away, it makes a whole lot of difference.
Yeah, both Susan and Mary said they have a mat that turns.
Yes, a mat that turns helps too. So if you have a rotating mat, yes, a rotating mat actually helps too. So you don't have to move the ruler off the way or anything like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please like and share this video with all your friends. Make sure you share it with anybody else who might be struggling with their square ruler. Again, this will be up on our Colourwerx YouTube channel soon after the broadcast. And with that,
we have this week's question.
We have this week's question for the $10 Colourwerx gift card. How well do you know your square ruler? So let's see how well everybody knows their square ruler. All righty. So with that, we're going to bug out of here. It's getting steamy. I'm going to need my fan. The humidity is kicking in again. I've got my personal, what's this called, Vornado going here. But we thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We will be back again in 3 weeks to talk more about our Colourwerx fabrics on August 27th. Same channel, same time, and we will see you then. Thank you guys so much. Have a great weekend.